Hello VC, hello everyone. Video, a little bit of a change of pace. I used to do a lot of videos and I will do again. I say that often, but it's true. But in this case, I thought I'd do it as a video, as this is inspired by Chris, the long cut, who started a thread a couple of weeks ago, which you can guess from the title of this video and the thumbnail. And I thought, yeah, I can do something with that, because yeah, I have a lot of vinyl records in the studio where you can see me doing live streams on Fridays, and but I also have here. I also have in another shed outside. I have upstairs records, and then I have a little office where I do my writing, where sometimes I do listen to music as well, but I don't have a turntable there. That being said, I have a CD player, because yes, I have CDs. I have a lot of CDs, but I usually don't pay attention to them anymore. So most of them are stored in card boxes in the garage, and I did a selection of about 250, 300 CDs that I like, that I don't have on vinyl because they don't exist on vinyl, that are there for me to to choose from. And in the past 8-10 years, I don't know, as this is the place where I listen to music, where I have the smallest library, the least amount of choice, of course, there's a bigger chance that I repeat there, and which means that my CDs might be the records I listen to the most. Because also I'm not the kind of person who listens over and over to the same record, or very rarely. But yeah, so I thought my 10 most listened records are CDs. Don't blame me. I know, I'll go to hell. But I'll start with a French one. Lighthouse, a French indie band from the early 90s. I believe this is the first album. It might be the second one. I think there's 3 albums. And Lighthouse is a quatuor. And yeah, it's really melodic indie with very lush string arrangements. It's just fantastic. If you like later Beatles, that might be to your liking. But the real treat with that is the singing. It's a French singer, and he has a good English accent, because he sings in English, and his voice is unique. There is an androgeneity to his voice that is spectacular. And if you know the singer from a few years ago, Conan Moccasin, it will be surprising and striking, as he has exactly the same voice. So much so that it's kind of freaky. And yeah, well, this record I listened to a lot. Even when it was released, I was going back and forth between, do I love this, or do I think it's too much cheesy, too much arrangement, overproduced. And it's not overproduced, but it took me a while to really accept that this is really something amazing. Next, a record from a band I have a lot of records from on vinyl. And most of his records during the 90s and 2000s were released on Touch Records, the label in the UK. So most of them were CD only. Eventually, some were issued on vinyl, and eventually he reissued most of them on vinyl. I'm talking about Biosphere. Autour de la Lune, the French titled Biosphere album from Norway. Probably a nod to Earache, as the music here is less ambient than his usual work. It's more melodic, it's minimal, but it's more sparse in a way, and it's beautiful. If it was on vinyl, I would listen to that. I mean, I listen to that a lot because it's, I explained, but I tend to forget about talking about this album often when I talk about Biosphere because of that. But It's probably one of my top three favorite Biosphere albums, alongside Cirque and Shenzhou. Autour de la Lune, Biosphere. Next is another French band, Carmina. This is their second album, Lumiel. The first one is amazing, the second one is amazing, and the third one, the final one, is really, really good. Carmine is kind of Leftfield pop trio, guitar, bass, singing, drum. They sing both in English, French, German, with a thicker accent than Lighthouse, but very charming. It is kind of austere in a way. It is very melancholic, but also a little bit sad most often. It reminds me a lot of Pram, the band from Birmingham, the avant pop band, and also, of course, Robert Wyatt to a certain extent. You might be interested in this even more if you know that the drummer here is Théo Jarrier, who runs the shop and the label Souffle Continu with Bernard. And he's a great drummer. He played in jazz ensembles. He curated a lot of great labels of avant-garde, jazz, improv. But this is a straight-up pop record, and it's just beautiful. And never got issued on vinyl. There's 2 7-inches of Carmine on vinyl that I love and cherish. There's also one 7-inch by Lighthouse, but it's a live recording and the sound is not that good. Fourth one. They're, apart from the last 3, they're not really in order. But this is Old, which is James Plotkin, one of the most in-demand mastering engineers in experimental music, indie music in the past 20 years. This is his first band, the 4th and final album of that project, Old, on Earache, the Birmingham label. Grindcore, thrash, punk, metal label. This is also that, but as you can see from the artwork on the jacket, well, this is space rock, space prog, to be precise. This is kind of at the crossroads of Hawkwind, Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells, Mike Oldfield, and maybe something like Face No More, Angel Dust period. This is very weird. This is also good and melodic. This is the most accessible record of Old, before he went on to do other stuff, mostly with the guitar. And this is the only one that doesn't exist on vinyl. I've been championing and lobbying Earache to reissue this on vinyl, and they said maybe, but I don't hold my breath. Next is a record, I think she hasn't done any other records since then, Hanifa Walida, with Earl Blaze. Hanifa Walida used to be, as you can see here, called Shaki. Shaki, under the name Shaki, she released an album in 1991, I believe, on Imago, one of the most futuristic or forward-thinking hip-hop albums of the 90s, featuring a lot of people that would become really celebrated for innovation in hip-hop. And I love that album, and I love her and her voice. Her voice is really what makes this stand out, as she has a very androgynous voice as well. She changed her name from Shaki to Hanifa Walida. I don't know if it's her real name originally. She's a social worker in Brooklyn. Before her first album, she was in a band called Brooklyn Funk Essentials, All Stars or something like that. But yeah, this is really, when I want to listen to a rap record, This is my go-to record, even if it's much more than rap. But I think it's nice also to say it's a rap record. Another song-based record from the original New Zealand Kiwi punk, Chris Knox, who I think by '79 he already released punk. Then he did the Toll Dwarves on the Flying Nun label. And Toll Dwarves and him solo is kind of the same, except this is less instruments. And this is a lot of songs, 21 songs, and I love them. Songs of You and Me. It's a record that is the record I discovered him through when this was released. And it's very melodic. He has a very nice voice, very joyful voice. His melodies are amazing, inventive, but it's kind of like a lo-fi folk record with some rock and roll. And to this date, yeah, that's the one that they unfortunately haven't issued on vinyl. Fortunately, some songs of this were issued on previous albums, but these are like the definitive versions, I guess. Yeah, next, a Prog record. And you'll notice that most of my jewel cases are bummed so much. Thinking Plague, In Extremis, on the great Cuneiform label. Thinking Plague had a couple of albums in the 80s, early 90s that were released on vinyl, Rock in Opposition, a little bit of stubborn music, not good, but not wow, not super joyful. This is just a treasure trove of cool melodies, cool solos, cool ideas of arrangements, lots of stuff happening constantly. There's a female singer. This is the band of Mike Johnson, if I remember correctly, with a bunch of friends, musicians, who are mostly academic, educators, and this is their hobby. This sounds kind of like Henry Cow, King Crimson, and also U-Totem, 5UU, like the US branch of Canterbury rock. When after this was released, I actually went to see them live. It was the first time I traveled to go see a band at the Mimi Festival in Arles in south of France. It was amazing. The only thing I could say against this album is that the keyboard player, he's focusing on his playing and his melodies. So he, as someone who's really into electronics and synthesis and sound design, he kind of uses the most basic sounds from his keyboard, but he makes up for that with great melodies, great musicianship, and yes. And there's another album after this one that is really good, and after that they're good, but I think this is the definitive high mark in their discography. Thinking Plague. And now we get to my top three. First one is Naked City, Absinthe. Naked City is a band featuring John Zorn, the saxophone player, who rejuvenated free jazz in the 80s, with Fred Frith from Henry Carl, Bill Frissell, Dwayne Horowitz, Mark Ribot. I don't remember who the drummer is. I think it's the same as in Masada. The first Naked City album was a free jazz assault extravaganza. Very cool album. Very, very cool. This one is more like an avant-garde experimental record. There's some jazz still in it, but it's more more experimental. What really makes me go back to this all the time is the tracks where Fred Frith and Bill Frissell use what they're good at, very good, which is the volume pedal. So you get like kind of pads and drones from Wayne Horowitz with Bill Frissell and and Fred Frith ad-libbing on the guitar with the volume pedal to magnificent effect. This is some of the most serene music I've ever heard. There's lots of tension, but at the same time, it's just about sheer beauty. But also with something kind of venomous, which I guess the choice of Hans Bellmer's artwork for the jacket with this photo of one of his sculptures, controversial artist, kind of highlights. Absinthe by Naked City on John Zorn's labeled Sadiq, New York by way of Tokyo. And next is something that has connections with that as well, in a way. As this is Fascinoma by John Hassell, a musician I adore, trumpet player. This features Rick Cox, Ry Cooder, and a bunch of others. This was not released on ECM, which is the label that released most of John Hassell's music throughout the 80s and 90s. This is from the late 90s, if I remember correctly. And this is my go-to album for when I want to have music in the background when I go to sleep. This features one of the most famous jazz themes, if not the number one jazz theme. Dum, 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 dum. Which is obvious, Duke Ellington's Caravan. And there's two versions of that track here under the name Caravanesque and Caravan Suite. This is fourth world ambient jazz with a very dub production, like bass heavy, very slowed down, narcotic, dub, narcotic jazz, and I had some of my most psychedelic experience is listening to that album. I adore it. And last, number one, my most listened record, Re-Entry, the second album of Techno Animal, which is Justin Broderick from Napalm Death and Godflesh, Earache, and Kevin Martin, God, The Bug, and many other projects. He did the cover himself, and he's a graphic designer as well, and a curator. He curated the series of compilations in the 90s, Macrodub Infection and Ambient Isolationism. He was also a contributor to The Wire magazine. And the first album was kind of an industrial affair. But it had a long track on the CD that was an ambient track, very beautiful, but not on the vinyl version. This was never released on vinyl. This was released on Virgin, by the way. Yes, my most listened record is on Virgin. And it's a double CD, very long. The first CD is great, but I never listen to it because I always go straight to the second one, which is more ambient, which features Dave Cochrane on bass, which means that you got some of the deepest bass lines ever recorded. It also features people like John Hassell on trumpet, David Toop as well, and a few other musicians. And this is like industrial dub, ambient, with a great flair for ambience and at times pure ambient as well. And yeah, I absolutely adore this record. That was recently reissued on digital, but I really hope one day this happens on another format. And I just have 5 honorary mentions quickly, because I could go on for a long time, but I just wanted to show these. So V, which is an indie band, short-lived indie band from the UK on the short-lived Gift label, which was an offshoot of Warp for indie music. And what's interesting with this is it features a remix by Autechre. So it's Autechre 1995. Autechre could do no wrong, and they turned this track into a monster shoegaze, industrial ambient techno track, and I go to this record a lot. So for one track, this one I also go only to one track, because sorry, because I have it on vinyl, a triple vinyl version of that, but the vinyl version lacks one track, which is actually my favorite on this. This is Consumed by Plastikman, hero of techno, acid techno. But this is, if you're into Puerto Rico's Thomas Conner, this you will really like this. And it's kind of Plastikman doing Thomas Conner, chain reaction, almost Biosphere influenced techno, and it's amazing. This is the Japanese version, which features also, well, the CD with the Plastikman logo, which a lot have seen without knowing what it is, and a bonus mini CD of live versions. Yeah, I listen to this record a lot. And this record, a live show from 1996, to which I attended personally. I was there when David Shee, Robert Hampson, Maine, originally from Loop, also collaborator of Godflesh. They all played live in this venue in Paris called Le Garage, if I remember correctly. I remember this show was the day before my final exams, so it was a bit stressful because it was so good and I didn't want to leave till the end, but I had to head home through the subway and the commuter. Good times. But what's really amazing with this CD is the track by Scanner, Robin Rimbaud. Back in the early 90s, his music was dedicated to parroting private conversations through his scanner and inserting them into the music he was making, to the point that it became the focal point. I'm French, I understand English fairly well, but I rarely focus on the meaning of the words when I listen to English songs or text. I focus more on the flow, on the tone, the voice, etc. But as this gig was in France, he was parroting live conversations, so it was a French conversation, and it was a very emotional one between an old woman and her daughter, who she tried to reconnect with, and you could see that the daughter was a bit distant, and that the mother was probably very lonely. So it was so good, because of course it's not just the conversation, it's how Robin Rimbaud creates like a musical frame around it. It's just amazing. A duo, Jason Spaceman and Matthew Shipp. Jason Spaceman from the Spaceman 3 and Spiritualized. Spaceman 3 is still my favorite rock band. And Matthew Shipp is my favorite modern contemporary jazz pianist. This was released on Treader, a label curated by Spring Hill Jack, a duo of drum and bass, avant drum and bass, also signed on Virgin, if I remember correctly. And they released a lot of like odd collaborations like that, crossover from between jazz, electronics, jazz, indie, jazz, noise. And each have pastel cardboard jacket with an embossed golden animal. And yeah, Spaceship. This record I wish existed on vinyl, but I still listen to it a lot, all the time. And the label has reissued some of their key releases on vinyl, but not this one yet. Maybe one day. And finally, a record I listen to all the time because it will take me a lifetime to get through it. It's the Bernard Parmegiani box set, Œuvres électroniques. The music he did with the GRM, the Groupe de Recherche Musicale. Bernard Parmegiani, my favorite electronic music composer, even if it's not electronic music, it's musique concrète, which is all part of the same family. I met him, I interviewed him, he invited me to his studio. This is 15 CDs of records I already have on vinyl, records I don't have because they don't exist on vinyl, and records that were never issued before. So there's a booklet, and it will take me a lifetime to exhaust this because his music is so dense and rich. So yeah, I listen to this very often. Anyways, that was my 10 most listened records ever, plus 5 honorary mentions. I hope you liked this. You can leave a comment to continue the conversation, and I'm sure I'll see you on my live streams or somewhere else soon. Thank you. Bye bye.